As Unitarian Universalists, we believe truth is larger than any one book or way. Religion and science go hand in hand. Integrity requires freedom of conscience. Diversity is something to celebrate. In the struggle for justice, we come alive. Our highest aspiration and calling is love. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever path you are on, you are welcome here. Our chalice reading this morning comes from Marta Valentine. We pause this morning from the chaos of the world to reclaim the beauty within these walls that carry us through our week. We lift this community onto our shoulders with pride and grace-filled expectations for our children and our children's children. Once again, welcome to West Shore Unitarian Universalist Church. We have so much good that's going on. Check out the West Shore Weekly in your order of service about events coming up and how you can get involved. We're excited to welcome our guest speaker this morning, Reverend Beth Marshall. Reverend Marshall is a lifelong Unitarian Universalist with a bachelor's degree in English from Bowling Green State University and a master's of divinity from Meadville Lombard Theological School in Chicago. And this is where she and Reverend McCarr were classmates, and she taught him how to make a proper gin and tonic. She has served congregations in Southold, New York, Toledo, Ohio, and Canton, Ohio. She has recently served as a temporary targeted minister in Cleveland, Ohio, Erie, Pennsylvania, and Traverse City, Michigan. She lives in Oberlin, Ohio, with her husband, Tony Wilgus, and together they have 5 grown children and 9 grandchildren. Now, if you're here for the first or second time and you don't mind letting others know, please raise your hand so we can give you a special welcome. Oh, welcome. We're so glad you're here. Thank you for joining us. So while our children go to their classes, let's greet each other warmly, and the greeting time will end with the sounding of the bowl. Now Dave is going to share some information about our offering today.
When I was in grade school back in Oklahoma, my grandmother, Granny we called her, would come over to our house often, and when she did, I would ask her routinely to play the piano. She never really played an actual piece. She was more like just improvising. Because you see, in her early years, she used to play the piano for the silent films in the Glory Be Theater in Miami, Oklahoma. Great stories she had about being the target for precision popcorn throwing from the rowdy kids on the front row. On into high school, our church organist, who was my teacher, would take me to the each Sunday after church to the Coleman Theater to play the mighty Wurlitzer organ before the Sunday matinee began. I was in awe of what that organ can do, and she would show me how it was used back in the days for the silent film era. George Coleman was a mining magnate in northeast Oklahoma, and he had this theater built, a Spanish colonial mission style with Louis XV interior, an opulent palace. Urban renewal came to Miami, and they decided to turn this theater into a modernized twin theater. So they sold the organ to the Billy James Hargis Christian Crusade Cathedral in Tulsa, Oklahoma, until he went belly up. And then the organ ended up in a private residence in Texas. Well, fortunately for Miami, the project never happened. Similar to Playhouse Square, the city got together and decided we're going to save this palace. So the Coleman Theater now is back into its opulent original state. And the guy in Texas heard about this. He said, that organ needs to be back in its home. So he donated the organ back to the Coleman Theater, and now silent films are back on a regular basis there. A few years ago, I was attending a conference at the Eastman School of Music in Rochester, and the theme for this conference was the organ and cinema. A highlight of the conference was the showing of the 1928 silent film, The Passion of Joan of Arc, accompanied with live organ music in a church. And I thought, I can do that. So that's when I started my silent film series here at West Shore. A little over a year ago, Emily Lawrence, she was here playing harp for one of our choral Sunday services, and she had heard about our silent film series. And she's the executive director of the Cleveland Silent Film Festival. And she asked if we would like to be a part of it, and I, of course, said yes. The mission of the Cleveland Silent Film Festival is to present diverse, high-quality films from the silent era in and around the Cleveland, Ohio. These films are brought to life through the live accompaniment by professional musicians that specialize in silent film performance. We additionally sponsor educational workshops taught by visiting artists for music students in local high schools and colleges. These students further the Cleveland Silent Film Festival mission by performing additional film screenings with live music for the public. It's committed to honoring Cleveland's cultural heritage while also presenting films that spotlight the work of international and underrepresented filmmakers, actors, and musicians. They also engage wonderful speakers with expertise in silent film and film music for student and public talks. Events are now routinely being done at the Cleveland Museum of Art, the downtown Cleveland Public Library, Lakewood Public Library, the Cleveland Cinematheque, and here at West Shore. Not bad company to be affiliated with. Over the past several years, the popularity of silent films has returned, and even though you can rent a DVD or even watch one on YouTube, there's nothing like having live musicians playing the music, whether it's from an actual score or a variety of other ways to perform the music. You know, back in the heyday of the silent films, the large theaters would have large orchestras. Your medium-sized theaters usually had a classical pipe organ. Eventually, Robert Hope Jones created the concept of revising the way the organ was built to form what's now called the mighty Wurlitzer. Your smaller local theaters usually just had an upright piano with Granny at the keys. And what's most interesting, in those days, it was mostly women who played in these small venues because women weren't allowed to be in an orchestra. Oh. The Cleveland Silent Film Festival has pioneered the fostering of this great art form here in Cleveland area and is giving so many musicians a chance for employment to be part of this great art form. Our Worship, Music, and Arts Program Council has decided that we would like to give our monthly outreach offering to the Cleveland Silent Film Festival. If you go to our website and look under special events, you will see my upcoming Halloween film coming up on October 26th. A little plug here for that. The Monster, starring Lon Chaney. And there is also a link to the Cleveland Silent Film Festival website that you can learn more about them. This morning's offering will now be given and greatly received.
A reading today is from A Secret Gift by Ted Gupp. On Sunday, December 17, 1933, an ad, no bigger than a playing card, appeared on page 3 of the Canton Repository. A mere 158 words, it would catch the eye of the entire town, be passed from household to household, then spread by word of mouth well beyond, making news as far away as New York. It read in full, "In consideration of the white-collar man, suppose if I were confronted with an economic situation where the bread of tomorrow is the problem of today. There is a question in my mind if I would accept charity directly offered by welfare organizations. I know there are hundreds of men that are confronted with economic problems and think, feel, and act the same way. To men or families in such position, the maker of this offer, who will remain unknown until the very end, will be glad if he is given an opportunity to help from 50 to 75 such families so they will be able to spend a merry and joyful Christmas. To such men or families that will request such financial aid, the writer pledges that their identity will never be revealed. Please write Beaver Doe, General Delivery, Canton, Ohio. In writing, please familiarize me with your true circumstances, and financial aid will be promptly sent. The gift, the paper explained, was meant for those who might otherwise hesitate to knock at charity's door for aid. Such hesitation went beyond the stigma attached to accepting charity. This is a genuine Christmas gift, involving no strings and no embarrassment to the recipient. The name Beaver Doe is, of course, fictitious, the paper observed. Perhaps the name Kris Kringle is fictitious too, but the genuineness of the spirit of giving he represents has never been questioned. Not surprisingly, within 2 days, the post office was deluged with letters addressed to Mr. Beaver Doe, General Delivery, Canton, Ohio. The letters came from every walk of life, from a roofer, a car dealer, a locksmith, a mill worker, a cobbler, a pastor's assistant, a butcher, a bell captain, and an array of fallen executives that read like a who's who of city nobles. And there were children who secretly took up their pens and pencils and asked on behalf of parents too proud to seek help for themselves. How many letters came in, whether it was hundreds or thousands, no one knows. Initially, he had intended to send $10 to some 75 families, but he found himself unable to turn away so many worthy appeals, so he doubled the recipients and halved the amounts to $5. Beaver Doe never imagined that his modest checks would reverse the course of the Great Depression, but they did allow for many a child to go to bed with a full stomach, for presents to miraculously appear, for enough coal to heat the house that week and into the next, and some token payment for the family doctor who looked after the son's polio, a daughter's jaundice, or a father's tuberculosis. Given that many families had 6, 7, or 8 children, the 150 checks cumulatively reached a wide swath of Canton's neediest. For 75 years, Beaver Doe's identity remained a secret. The letters seemingly vanished, and Beaver Doe went quietly to his grave, joined in time by all those who had written them. And there, this tale might well have ended, but it did not.
And now all are welcome to come forward to share from the heart in our community ritual of For All That Is Our Lives. Please.
his power, dreamed of good that yet shall be. Bright the path before us lies. Joyful pilgrims now we rise. Life calls us on. Life calls us on. Life calls us on. Life calls us on.
A wise poet once asked, "What do we do with the gifts we are given?" You may know the answer to this already. We bless the world. That small ad that appeared anonymously in the Canton Repository in December of 1933 offered something available nowhere else. I can almost hear someone commenting that it was too incremental to make a lasting difference, or that it failed to address the systemic issues that led to the suffering. And while there is a kernel of truth in those statements, they both miss the intent and the long-term impact for good. What that tiny ad brought to mind is a familiar story of an old woman who's walking the shore of the beach, throwing starfish back in, one after the other. She knew all too well she could not save all the starfish, but she knew it would make a difference to the ones she could throw back in the ocean. In A Secret Gift, Ted Gupp weaves together layers of stories. There is the compelling story of how one individual saw great suffering and fading hope in his hometown and quietly addressed it without fanfare. There is the story of how the author seized an opportunity to delve deep into his family histories and its secrets. And lastly, reading between the lines, there is a template for any of us who want to address the overwhelming suffering and need around us and feel inadequate to the task at hand. Together, it reminds the reader of how one bold act of kindness can have generational impact. I trust that a few of you may already know the story of Sam Stone's secret gift to the city of Canton. Maybe your book group read it. Maybe you have a personal connection to it, because Canton is just down the road. Sam Stone ad in the Canton Repository pointed to a different era, a time when a gallon of gas cost 18 cents, a loaf of bread, a nickel, a dozen of eggs could be bought for 28 cents. So in 1933, the gift of $10 was closer to $250, enough to really make a difference. In 1933, asking for any kind of help was too often equated with failure, moral failure. We hadn't yet embraced the idea that asking for help could actually be a sign of strength. And that is in large part why Sam's Stone offer was shrouded in secrecy, and why Sam Stone promised anonymity to those who wrote him. It was important for him that both the identity of the giver and the receiver be protected. The week the ad appeared, it was widely shared, and the response overwhelming. With a promise of privacy, hundreds and maybe thousands of letters flooded in. But the letters were not only from white-collar businessmen. Yes, some did write, but so did wives, unbeknownst to their husbands. Children quietly wrote on behalf of their parents. Single parents wrote, widows wrote, people living on their own wrote to Mr. B. Virdo. The responses crossed all demographics and trades and neighborhoods. Stone realized that some were coming from people he knew or recognized from his social connections. The response was so great that Sam Stone decided to double the number of recipients and give out gifts of $5 instead of 10. So he chose 150 letters and sent out checks. Then the original letters, those 150, were tucked in an envelope, placed in an old suitcase, and hidden in the Gupp's attic. A legacy that almost didn't come to light, a story that was almost not told. Christopher Mogg of the New York Times had this thought about the collection of letters. He writes, "Taken together, the letters from families struggling through the Depression create a larger story of a city and a nation struggling to accept a new notion, that without help, they might not survive, no matter how hard they worked." So I invite you now to hear a few of the original letters from 1933. Their cadence is different from what we are accustomed to hearing. Yet beneath almost every sentence is an unspeakable grief. It's mixed with shame and embarrassment and just a shard of lingering hope.
Dear Sir, your interesting and benevolent article appearing in the repository prompted me to write and advise how the Depression left the writer. For 26 years, I was in the automobile business, prosperous at one time, and have done more than my share in giving at Christmas, and at all times, in fact. I have a family of 6, and struggle is the word for me now for a living. Christmas will not mean much to our family this year as my business, bank, real estate, and insurance policies are all swept away. Our resources are at nil at present. Perhaps my situation is no different than hundreds of others. However, a man who knows what it is to be up and down can truly appreciate the spirit of one who has gone through the same ordeal. You are to be congratulated for your benevolence and kind offer to those who have experienced this trouble and such as the writer is going through. No doubt you will have a happy Christmas, as there is more real happiness in giving and making someone happy than receiving. May I extend you a very happy Christmas. George W. Monette, 1329 Woodward Avenue Northwest, Canton, Ohio.
Dear Mr. B. Vidro, I saw in last night's paper the most human thing I have ever seen in print before. Instead of giving to some church or organization to have your name mentioned over the pulpit or in the newspaper, you chose the silent way of celebrating Christ's birth, which you surely will be repaid. No wonder prosperity is returned to you and yours. May it never look dark again for you, is my prayers. Well, I will write a few things about my circumstances. You mentioned men, but I am not a man. But I am taking the responsibility of a man as father and mother. My husband died 2 years ago this March, left me with 2 boys to support, one in McKinley High, another 9 years old. I have worked every day at real estate, and you know what an uphill job that is. But I've been able to keep my home and boys with food and clothing by the effort I have put forth. It looks pretty dark sometimes, but we still hold on to that ray of hope that this terrible depression will soon be over. And I want to state that I have never received charity of any kind or have never complained to anyone before. But after I read your letter, I made up my mind to write to you, not asking, just telling you my circumstances. But if you think I am deserving of part of your Christmas cheer that you are giving, I assure you that it will be greatly appreciated and spent for the right kind of things for my boys and myself. May God bless you in wishing you a Merry Xmas and a prosperous New Year's. I remain Mrs. R. DeHoff, 3039 9th Street, Southwest, Canton.
Dear Sir, I noticed in this evening's paper that you want to help unfortunate families for Christmas. During the Depression, our business failed and we lost our home. 3 months ago, my husband had a stroke. His right arm and leg is paralyzed. His mind is also affected and he cannot talk. We are wondering, will this be the last Xmas our little family will all be together? We have 2 adopted daughters, youngest 11 and the other 14. Frequently, I visit 2 orphaned children at Fairmount Children's Home. The one girl is 14 and stayed with us 1 year. Her little sister is 9 and I cared for her for 6 years. Last month, I visited them and they asked me if I couldn't come and get them and let them spend their Christmas vacation with us. I told them that if it was at all possible for me to come after them, I would do so, but I do not even have car fare to go after them and take them back and buy them a few little things for Christmas. It would make them so happy to be with us, and in our sorrow, make us happy to think that some kind-hearted person made it possible for us to bring joy and happiness to others. God has given you a noble and good heart, and I am sure He will reward you. May you continue to prosper, even more so in the future than you have in the past, is my earnest wish. Will you kindly think of us and make us happy on that great day? I remain very truly yours, Mrs. L. Margot, 800 9th Street, Northwest Canton, Ohio.
Thank you. When Gup's mother handed him this ratty suitcase of letters and receipts, he briefly considered throwing the whole thing away, wondering if it was even worth his time. And any of us who have ever sorted out a loved one's estate with mountains of paperwork knows a little bit of that territory. But thankfully, he followed his instincts. Growing up in Canton, he'd heard a handful of stories of this mysterious Mr. B. Virdo. But it wasn't until he began sorting through all these letters that the pieces began to come together. Never in his wildest dreams had he imagined that Mr. B. Virdo was actually his maternal grandfather. Never had he considered that B. Virdo was a pseudonym, a combination of his mother's and sister's names. B for Barbara, V for Virginia, and Doe for Dorothy. Gup describes a suitcase of letters as a time capsule into the present. He saw a litany of names of families that he had grown up with in Canton. Reading those private letters left him conflicted and curious. Each one had been written in confidence. It was never intended for public consumption. In one letter, a woman wrote, "If I thought this would be printed in the papers, I would die of hunger first." His grandfather had promised complete anonymity to those who were courageous enough to write him. But now, decades later, the grandson knew that this was a powerful story that needed to be told. But what about the promise? After years of digging, months of digging through census data and even Ancestry.com, Gupp approached the surviving family members of those original letters. He tracked them down. Their gratitude for his interest in their stories and their willingness to share became the basis of a short piece in the New York Times and then later his book, A Secret Gift. These were real families whose stories and struggles exemplified grit and determination. These lines jumped out at me. Nothing in my grandfather's day was as out of fashion as self-pity. Only to later generations, coddled by prosperity and analgesics and concerns over leisure and longevity, would such flinty self-reliance seem extraordinary, or explorations of one's own sorrow become so common as to be featured on daytime TV. Those who grew up after the Great Depression, he wrote, in families determined to snuff out risk by surrounding themselves with smoke detectors and seatbelts, might find it hard to imagine the perilous lives their grandparents lived. So fraught was risk and hardship was their world that the idea of voicing one's particular plight would have struck many as curious, presumptuous. Now that framework may seem harsh to us in 2025, but it puts some of the letters in context. What that collection of letters became was nothing short of a miracle. In November of 2010, 400 people gathered at the Palace Theater over on Market Street in Canton. They gathered for a reunion that was never meant to happen. Attending that night were mostly children and grandchildren of the letter's authors, as well as the last surviving author. Many present were surprised to learn intimate details of their families. One man recounted that he had been considering committing suicide before he received his $5 gift. One woman recounted that the porcelain-faced doll she received that year was the only doll she ever had. Another woman said that after her parents received their check from Mr. B. Virdo, her mother took her to the five and dime store and bought a small wooden horse that became her favorite childhood toy. 7 decades later, she now owns several horse farms and a stable full of Shetland ponies. After the reunion, Gupp reflected, saying, "I think there is a message here that the people in Canton know how to get through hard times by pulling together." And for me, that's the universal key in all this: strangers pulling together, sharing what they have, looking out for one another. That perspective takes it from the story of one small group of people a long time ago to a story of all of us today. Running parallel to the story of all the letters is how Ted Gupp was able to develop a more complete, albeit complex, understanding of who his grandfather was as a human being. As a former investigator for the Washington Post, Gupp was no stranger to research. However, he could not have anticipated what he learned, any more than any of us who have innocently delved into family history. Discover stories that we learn that stories we've been told don't actually match up with the facts. Gupp learned that his maternal grandfather was by birth an Orthodox Jew from Romania. He learned that contrary to what he'd been told, excuse me, his grandfather was not actually an only child. His grandfather had 6 siblings. He learned that his grandfather had, shall we say, been flexible with the facts around the place of his birth as to avoid legal entanglements and issues with his citizenship. He discovered a picture of his father dressed very elegantly as a woman and considers it confirmation of his grandfather's playful side. He learned how his grandfather's early struggles with wanting to belong to a real community and his worries about money drove his business ambitions. He learned details of his grandfather's failed businesses and the successful ones. And he learned how fighting anti-Semitism and supporting democracy globally were constant themes in his grandfather's life. To this point, he learned how during World War II in 1940, his grandfather quietly shipped 50 long woolen coats to England for the troops there. His grandfather owned several clothing shops, so it was a natural way for him to do what he could to help defeat Hitler. In each coat, he'd included a handwritten note. It was a long letter, but it includes this one line: "I hope that you will continue in spirit, high and strong, and with the firm belief that that which is right will survive, and that which is wrong will perish." He learned his grandfather was complicated. Sam Stone's Jewish ancestry may have gone underground. However, he embodied two Jewish ideals: Tikkun Olam, a call to repair the world, and Tzedakah, a call to care for the poor, because as fellow human beings, we owe a debt to one another. Gupp writes that this was the essence of Verdau's gift. It telegraphed to an entire community that it was worth saving. It was a way for him to say thank you to Canton for taking him in, making him feel like he belonged. And it was a way for him to tell others that they mattered, that he saw them and their struggles, all while keeping his name out of the papers. After that reunion in November of 2010, several local business people in Canton were inspired to make very significant donations to families in need, but quietly under the name of B. Verdau. As far away as Utah, a woman learned of the story and donated $15,000 to families in need in her area, also anonymously under the name B. Verdau. We are now, of course, at a different point in history. Hometowns across the country are facing varying levels of homelessness and unemployment, uncertain healthcare costs, incursion of ICE and the National Guard, and spikes in anti-Semitism. The good news is, though, that communities and individuals are doing what they can to help each other out. I love this one story from Maryland. A number of years ago, on the first Sunday in Advent, members of Severna Park Methodist Church were invited to come forward and take communion of bread and wine and a $100 bill. It was a reverse offering. And the instructions from their pastor were simple: listen to the need in the community around you. You may be in the right time and the right place with $100 in hand to do something. 100 congregants left church that morning with a $100 bill. That's $10,000. $10,000 had generously been donated to the church on two conditions. The donor must remain anonymous, and the money must be used to bring joy to others. The donor had said that she'd been despondent in the wake of Heather Heyer's death in Charlottesville, Virginia, and she wanted to do something for the people of her church. You may remember that Heather Heyer died while protesting in Charlottesville against the white supremacists and the neo-Nazis. So within no time after that first Sunday in Advent, reports started flocking into the church. One family created bags of socks and hand warmers and gift cards, and then when the family's car was approached by someone seeking loose change, the youngest daughter handed them one of the bags that they'd made. Some families added money of their own and were able to fill a cart for the SPCA of Annapolis with pet food, or they paid off Christmas gifts at Kmart for families. Ginger ale and soup and warm socks were delivered to a cancer patient. Snow pants and gloves arrived anonymously so a small child with a brain tumor could play outside. Christmas presents appeared for children who were homeless, children whose parents were struggling, children in the hospital. Members sought out ways to serve the larger community. Their lens was framed with two questions by their pastor. Who is God putting in my path, and how am I being called to serve? Within these walls, we might frame those two questions slightly differently, something like, how can I open myself up to the universe and the opportunities it's presenting? Or how might I serve those in the greatest need? Ultimately, the congregation of Severna Park Methodist Church discovered how to use the gifts they'd been given. They blessed the world around them. Now, honestly, I've been around enough church leadership over the years to wonder if behind closed doors, leadership didn't quietly ask themselves if that $10,000 couldn't have been used better in the general church fund. Over the years, I've worked with various congregations, and I've had a handful of opportunities to do reverse offerings. Never on such a large scale, of course. I wish. But it warmed my heart to watch how each congregation found ways to respond to the needs in their own community, to bless and to brighten their corners of the world with increments of $25, $50. And the guidelines were always the same. The money must be used for someone or something outside of your immediate family. And then there was an expectation that they would be willing to share what they chose to do, either anonymously in writing or in person during a later worship service. And the results were not dissimilar from what the members of Severna Methodist Church did. They kept their eyes open to the needs around them and were able to respond in the moment. Art supplies arrived for a local elementary school teacher. Pet food was delivered to a local pet shelter. Food pantries were stocked, and piles of mittens and socks appeared at the local homeless shelter. And yes, each time I was keenly aware that some of it might go astray. But if it did, I never knew about it. I tried to use it as an opportunity to let go of the outcome and trust the process. And they never let me down. It was never about giving away money. It was an opportunity to serve in unexpected ways. For me, the message in A Secret Gift is one of persistent hope in a dark time. What I carry home is this. On the surface, life calls us to remember how even small gifts and blessings have the power to transform. The opportunities are there every day if we are open to seeing them. So do the small things. Do the small acts of kindness. Asking for help when we need it the most might be the more difficult challenge, but we are called to be brave and to ask when we need help. And lastly, we are each called to answer a handful of hard questions. How can I open myself to the opportunities that the universe is presenting? And how might I serve those in greatest need? At the core is the question that we began with. What will you do with the gifts you've been given? Choose to bless the world. So may it be. Amen. Would you rise and sing with me our closing hymn, number 131, Love Will Guide Us. Our closing words this morning were written by Jean Olson. May you be brave enough to expose your aching woundedness and reveal your vulnerability. May you speak your deepest truths, knowing that they will change as you do. May you sing the music within you, composing your own melody, playing your song with all your heart. May you draw and paint and sculpt and show, showing the world your vision. May you write letters and poetry, biographies, slogans, graffiti, and the great novel, laying bare your words to love and hate. May you love even though your heart breaks again and again, and until the end of your days, may your life be filled with possibility and courage. So may it be.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry with us until we meet again.